Hi, my name is Kumi Naidoo. I'm based in Johannesburg, South Africa. I'm a human rights and environmental activist. I'm currently serving as an advisor to the Community Arts Network as well as to the Green Economy Coalition. The biggest challenge that activism currently faces is being able to communicate in an accessible way that reaches the people that absolutely need to be reached, people on the front lines of climate catastrophe and so on. Artivism is essentially the coming together of arts and culture and activism to try to break through the communications deficit that we face, where we are not able to reach large numbers of people fast enough, and Artivism seeks to fix this deficit in our efforts to push for the big changes that humanity critically needs to make. Community Arts Network is a growing network which is very focused on how we can get arts and culture to be real in communities and to have the impact to contribute to peace, human rights, climate, and so on. And I'm really pleased to be joining a network that is not bureaucratic, very decentralized, and has great ideas about how we can take this work to a very different level. What approach CAN is using is what I would say is a culture of emergence. What I mean by that is that the solutions need to emerge, and what we need to do is create a context where millions of people are invited into the process of co-creating the solutions. If we don't engage people in co-creating the solutions within a culture of emergence, then I believe that we will never be able to get the kind of scale of participation that we need. And one of the reasons I'm really pleased to be with CAN is that CAN does not have an arrogance about we know what all the solutions in the world is. What we know is that arts and culture can make a constructive contribution, and that is what CAN is doing and will continue to seek to do, and I'm happy to try to contribute and help with that. Artivism is a critical success factor for us to be able to communicate in an accessible, in a simple, in an understandable way the intersecting crises that humanity currently faces. Artivism is also able to move people from understanding to action. In fact, expressions of arts and culture in their very nature is already activism in itself, because they are making people aware, they are moving people through the heart. And one of the downsides of conventional activism is that it sticks to facts, figures, very rational ways of trying to reach people, and clearly we've seen that only has limited appeal. And Artivism helps to compensate for that limited appeal and reaches a much larger number of people. Artivism, firstly, will be able to, and is already, communicating to new audiences. Critically, we need to reach much larger numbers of people if we're going to avert climate catastrophe and all the other associated challenges. However, given that the future is one that we can predict where there are going to be more challenges as a result of growing climate catastrophe. As I speak to you today, 1/3 of Pakistan is underwater from flooding. So in a context where there's going to be quite a lot of real difficult challenges that we have to face, we also have to think about the human beings that are having to deal with it. And I believe arts and culture is a very important part of contributing to psychological resilience. Let's be very clear, the coming decades are going to be tough while we try to address this. And as I said to Greta Thunberg and Fridays for the Future, when as Secretary General of Amnesty International, they received the Ambassador of Conscience Award, I looked at these young people and I said, don't let the Trumps and the Bolsonaros of the world deprive you of your happiness as a child. So while you fight, and please continue to fight, but do it with love, do it with fun, sing, dance, and enjoy yourself as well, because we're going to need to keep our spirits up if we are going to rise to the challenges that we are already facing and worse challenges that might lie ahead. Martin Luther King, speaking in 1965, said, "I refuse to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many to give luxuries to the few, when millions of God's children are smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in an affluent society." He said that in 1965 when I was 4 months old. If that was true then, it is 1,000 times true for the United States, where he was talking about, as well as everywhere in the world today. So creative maladjustment is the idea of us not adjusting to the status quo, pushing back against the status quo, essentially saying we refuse to adjust to injustice. And that's what creative maladjustment is. Albert Einstein once said, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting to get different results. Philanthropy around the world now must look at whether it continues to support exactly the same things that it had supported in the past. To support only interventions around facts and figures doesn't quite resonate with people. And what we see is that after so much of investment by philanthropy over so many years, we're still not having the results that we want, and things are actually getting more serious. So it is in that context, philanthropy is challenged to think differently, innovate more, take greater risk. In that sense, I'm pleased that Porticus is one of the first foundations that have stepped forward to take this area of how do we read the hearts as well as the minds of ordinary people on a large scale, and are supporting Artivism. So I'm really pleased with the step that Porticus has taken, and I hope that many other foundations and resource providers will be inspired and follow suit. I've been inspired by the West African anti-colonial leader Amilcar Cabral, who once said, "Tell no lies and claim no easy victories." I think after more than 4.5 years of activism, I am in a moment where I have to reflect, look back at my life and say, actually many of the things that I worked so hard to strengthen democracy, and democracy is under attack right now with the rise of fascism. As I speak to you today, there's so many environmental disasters happening and extreme weather events happening all around the world. So at the one level, you can reflect and think, was it a waste of time? No, it wasn't. It could have been much, much worse if people and institutions like the ones that I worked with and many others had not tried. But let's be honest, where we are right now, the window of opportunity to avert catastrophic climate change is very, very small and closing. So for me, this moment, when I reflect on the past, must be a moment of urgency, of greater effort, and also to recognize something that we've always known, that is not leaders who make history, but ordinary people. And part of the challenge to leadership right now is to create as many enabling conditions for ordinary people to participate in the biggest struggle of their life, not to save the planet, but to secure their children and their children's future, because that is what is at stake. At one level, understand the fact that young people, parents, grandparents, people of all backgrounds, ages are feeling extremely anxious, extremely scared, extremely fearful of the future. But what I say is this: pessimism is a luxury that we simply cannot afford at this moment. The pessimism of our analysis must be responded to by the creativity of our thoughts, our action, and that's why Artivism is so important, to actually help to counter the pessimism of the moment. That is not to suggest that people don't have a right to sometimes be pessimistic. We have every right to be pessimistic given how bad things are. But pessimism doesn't help us. Pessimism immobilizes us. And what we need is to acknowledge that things are really challenging and serious, but move beyond that and say, so long as we can breathe, so long as that we can feel, so long as human beings can love, so long as human beings can cry, so long as we have life in us, we're going to fight and fight and fight to secure our children's future. The good news is the solutions are all there. All that is lacking is political will. And the good news is political will in many countries is a renewable resource, if you know what I mean. We can kick the buggers out if they don't perform. Thanks.